Most people think money problems are proof of low intelligence. I have never believed that. In my experience, most people are not trapped because they are stupid. They are trapped because they are unclear. They do not know what money is supposed to do for them. They do not know what kind of life they are actually trying to buy. They do not know the difference between looking successful and becoming free. And because they do not know those things, they make one ordinary, socially approved mistake after another until anxiety becomes their financial identity. That is how a great many lives drift. I have known highly educated people who could discuss philosophy, politics, medicine, law, or technology at a remarkable level, yet could not tell you how much came into their household each month, how much left, what percentage they saved, what their fixed costs were, or how long they could last if income stopped. I have also known very ordinary people without elite credentials or dazzling careers, who built deeply stable lives because they grasped a few simple truths and repeated them for a very long time. That difference has always impressed me. People like the idea that money is mysterious. They like hidden rules, secret formulas, rare insights, private rooms, and advanced tricks, because complexity flatters the ego. But money is often far less complicated than people want it to be. The hard part is not the arithmetic. The hard part is behavior. The hard part is desire. The hard part is learning how to define enough in a world organized to keep moving the definition. That is the real contest. If you do not understand that, you can spend your whole life blaming income for a problem that is actually being driven by identity, expectation, and habit. I learned fairly young that money is only useful when it gives you control over your life. If it does not give you control, then whatever else it gives you is secondary. A person can have a very large income and still be trapped. He can have the house everybody admires, the car that produces compliments, the social circle that looks impressive in pictures, and the outward appearance of success, while privately being owned by debt, obligations, maintenance, fear, and the constant need to keep the machine running. Another person can earn less, live more quietly, save more consistently, owe less to strangers, and possess something infinitely more valuable than appearance. He can possess independence. I know which one I would rather be. That word matters. I do not mean independence in some theatrical sense. I do not mean rugged individualism as performance. I mean the quiet, practical, deeply powerful condition of waking up and knowing that your choices are less dictated by panic. I mean having enough margin in your life that you can leave a bad job, decline a foolish deal, survive a shock, or simply breathe without turning every setback into a crisis. That is what money is for. The trouble is that the culture keeps telling people money is for something else. It tells them money is for status. It tells them money is for display. It tells them money is for proving that they matter. It tells them money is for climbing a ladder whose height is never defined, because the people selling the ladder make more when you keep climbing. That is one of the most expensive lies in the modern world. The average person does not wake up one day and decide to sabotage his own finances. He does it gradually, almost politely. He absorbs assumptions. A better life should look bigger. Progress should be visible. If other people have more, then I must be falling behind. Debt is normal. Upgrades are healthy. Small luxuries are rewards. A higher income should immediately justify a higher fixed lifestyle. If I can afford the monthly payment, then I can afford the thing. If I still feel uneasy, I probably need more. Every one of those assumptions can cost a fortune. The hardest part is that many of them sound normal. Some even sound responsible. That is why they are so dangerous. People often imagine financial disaster comes from dramatic foolishness. Sometimes it does, but more often it comes from very ordinary ideas accepted without examination. A person takes on too much house because it feels adult. He adds too much car because it feels deserved. He picks up subscriptions, habits, social obligations, appearance costs, and convenience spending because none of them seem fatal on their own. Then one day he realizes he is making good money and still cannot breathe. That is not a mystery. That is accumulation in the wrong direction. Debt is one of the clearest examples. People think of debt mainly as an interest calculation. It is that, but it is much more than that. Every dollar of debt is a piece of your future already promised away. It is time you have not yet lived, but have already sold. It is labor that has been pre-committed. It is flexibility surrendered before you know which future circumstances will ask for flexibility the most. The math matters, but the emotional cost matters too. Debt narrows a life. It makes decisions heavier. It turns small interruptions into stress events. It transforms the future into a series of obligations rather than a field of options. I have never admired that bargain people often take it because they are not buying a product. They are buying relief. They are buying an identity. They are buying the temporary emotional release of not feeling behind. But emotional relief purchased through debt tends to be short-lived. The bill lasts longer than the feeling. The object becomes ordinary, but the obligation remains. That is a poor exchange. The reverse is true with saving. I have always thought of saving not as delayed pleasure, but as purchased freedom. If I save money, I have done more than move dollars from one place to another. I have purchased margin. I have purchased sleep. I have purchased a little reduction in fear. I have purchased the right to respond more intelligently when life refuses to cooperate. That is not abstract to me. That is the whole point. People dismiss saving because they think in extremes. If I cannot save a lot, they think there is no point. That is foolish. Small amounts matter because direction matters. Nobody goes from trapped to free in one leap. Dependence exists on a spectrum, and so does independence. A little savings is not complete freedom, but it is a movement toward freedom. That movement has psychological effects long before it has glamorous financial effects. The first $50 matters. The first $100 matters. The first week you realize you are no longer spending everything matters. The first month you watch yourself become a little less exposed matters. People underestimate how much confidence comes not from the size of an account, but from the knowledge that you are finally moving in the right direction. Direction is underrated. The culture loves dramatic events, giant raises, viral successes, big deals, sudden wealth. What actually changes most financial lives is not a dramatic event. It is direction held consistently. Spend a little less than you make. Save something every month. Automate what can be automated. Avoid obvious traps. Let lifestyle rise more slowly than income. Stay invested. Keep doing it through boredom, through inconvenience, through years when it does not feel exciting. That is how compounding works in the real world. Compounding is not only money earning money, it is wise behavior reinforcing wise behavior until the result begins to look larger than the behavior that created it. That is why I have never thought investing success required genius. It requires temperament far more often than brilliance. Patience matters more than prediction. Discipline matters more than drama. Participation matters more than perfection. You do not need to be a genius to stop doing foolish things. You need to be willing. That is why I have always been suspicious when someone says, "I am just not good with money." Usually that is not a technical diagnosis. Usually it is a story. Sometimes it is a shield. Sometimes it is a socially acceptable way of saying, "I do not want to make the sacrifices required to change." I do not mean that cruelly. Sacrifice is real. Downshifting is real. Changing habits is real. Looking ordinary in a culture that rewards performance is real. All of that has emotional cost, but the arithmetic itself is not especially hard. Spend less than you make. Save the difference. Be patient. Avoid debt when you can. Automate good behavior. Invest what you save. Repeat. That is not advanced theory. It is behavior. And because it is behavior, people resist it. A difficult formula would almost be easier, because then failure could be blamed on complexity. Behavior cannot be blamed the same way. Behavior asks whether you are willing to be temporarily less impressive in order to become more secure. Behavior asks whether you want the result or only the fantasy of the result. That question divides lives. A person who genuinely wants financial strength becomes willing to do some unglamorous things. He checks his balances. He becomes aware of inflows and outflows. He learns what his fixed costs actually are. He sees the number instead of guessing. He refuses the strange emotional luxury of remaining vague. Vagueness is expensive. People do not like looking closely because looking closely removes excuses. But awareness is power. The person who knows what is coming in and what is going out can change. The person who only feels the stress and never measures it remains in fog. Fog is fertile ground for fear, shame, and drift. Clarity may be uncomfortable, but it is useful. Once you know the numbers, even before the numbers improve, something important has happened. You are steering. I have known my financial position closely for most of my life, not because obsession is noble, but because awareness is practical. In the old days, people balanced checkbooks. The details have changed, but the principle has not. If you do not know where you stand, you are not really making decisions. You are drifting into outcomes and then acting surprised by them. Most unhappy financial lives contain too much drift. Another powerful source of drift is comparison. The modern world has turned comparison into a full-time occupation. It used to be that you compared yourself to your town, your school, your workplace, your family, your neighbors. Now you compare yourself to everyone with a camera and an internet connection. You compare yourself to performers, to marketers, to borrowed wealth, to staged lives, to edited homes, to filtered marriages, to temporary vacations displayed as permanent reality, to people whose entire business model depends on making your life feel insufficient. That machine is not neutral. It stretches desire. It relocates normal. It trains a person to feel that he is behind even when he is doing fine. This may be one of the most financially destructive inventions of our age, because once comparison becomes constant, enough disappears. The goalpost moves. You get the raise and still feel late. You buy the nicer house and immediately see a better one. You take the trip and come home feeling you did not travel correctly. You upgrade the car and then notice somebody younger, driving something sharper. It never ends because the objective was never actually the object. The objective was emotional relief, the feeling that at last you had arrived. But comparison destroys arrival. There is always another rung. That is why I care so much about the word enough. Enough is not laziness. Enough is not surrender. Enough is not saying ambition is foolish. Enough is saying that a person must eventually define what he is trying to achieve, or he will be manipulated forever. A person who has not defined enough can always be sold something. He can always be frightened into wanting more. He can always be shamed by someone else's visible life. He can always be made to feel temporarily inadequate in ways that happen to be very profitable for other people. That is not a good way to live. I have always believed that one of the hardest financial skills is learning to let the goalpost stop moving. Not because you stop growing, but because happiness becomes impossible when expectations grow faster than gratitude. You can work hard and still appreciate what you already have. You can be ambitious and still refuse to let the culture tell you that ordinary stability is failure. You can improve your finances without making your peace contingent on an endless sequence of upgrades. Those distinctions matter. The absence of them produces strange misery. I have met people with enviable incomes, beautiful homes, and all the visible markers of doing well who remained deeply uneasy because their desires kept expanding. They believed the unease would end at the next milestone. It never did. The next milestone simply introduced a more expensive standard and a more anxious peer group. They were not suffering from a lack of money. They were suffering from a lack of enough. That condition is expensive. It leads to spending for strangers. It leads to buying for imagined judgment. It leads to treating public display as private progress. This is one of the reasons I have always tried to separate utility from status. A purchase should do one of two things. It should either meaningfully improve your life, or it should be left alone. Too many purchases exist mainly to project something. They are not for use. They are for narrative. They are for being seen. They are for soothing the insecurity that comparison created in the first place. That is a vicious loop. You feel behind, so you buy to look closer to ahead. The buying relieves the feeling briefly. Then a new comparison appears. Then another purchase seems necessary. Eventually, a person can spend his whole life paying a tax to strangers who are not thinking about him nearly as much as he imagines. That is one of adulthood's great comedies. People put themselves under financial pressure to impress a crowd that is largely busy worrying about itself. Once you truly see that a great deal of spending starts to look absurd. A useful question cuts through the noise. If no one could see my life except me and the people I love, what would I choose? What kind of house? What kind of car? What kind of schedule? What kind of work? What kind of vacations? What kind of routines? What kind of spending? That question strips status out of the decision and lets utility speak. It is amazing how much of what people call necessity is really audience-driven. Remove the audience and the desire changes. The private version of a good life is often simpler, cheaper, calmer, and much more attainable than the public version people feel pressured to perform. That realization can save a fortune. It can also save a person. Because beyond the money, there is the emotional cost of living in performance mode. It must keep up appearances. It is never allowed to become quietly sufficient. That is exhausting. It is also fragile. A person whose finances depend on the continuation of an image is much weaker than he looks. That is why I respect savings so much. Savings is the opposite of performance. Savings is private strength. It is quiet power. It is often invisible to the outside world, which is precisely what makes it so useful. Most people think of savings as leftover money. What remains after life is funded. I think that is backward. Savings should be treated more like an expense because it purchases something essential. It purchases resilience. It purchases the ability to endure uncertainty. It purchases options. And uncertainty is not rare. People talk about emergencies as though they are exceptions. Life does not work that way. Job loss, illness, family trouble, divorce, recession, market declines, children in need, unexpected repairs, geopolitical disruptions, professional disappointments, broken partnerships, bad timing, all of it is part of the standard operating environment of life. The question is not whether disruptions will occur. The question is whether you will have any margin when they do. The odds that life asks something difficult of you are basically 100%. That fact should shape a person's financial life. This is why I have never thought saving was punishment. I have thought it was respect. Respect for fragility. Respect for uncertainty. Respect for the reality that tomorrow is not under contract. Respect for the idea that if something goes wrong, I would rather meet it with cash than with desperation. The beauty of savings is that it changes ordinary life too. It lets you negotiate differently. It lets you think longer term. It lets you decline some foolishness. It lets you leave bad situations sooner. It lets you sleep. That last point is underpriced. There is no spreadsheet return high enough to compensate for constant anxiety. I have never wanted a financial life that looked impressive and felt miserable. I have wanted money to serve me, not judge me. I have wanted simplicity. I have wanted enough liquidity and enough prudence that I was not one accident away from chaos. That may sound boring to some people. Boring is underrated. Boring can be beautiful in finance. A house you can truly afford is beautiful. A modest car paid for sensibly is beautiful. A savings habit that continues through inconvenience is beautiful. A low-cost investment plan you can stick with is beautiful. Cash reserves that keep your family steady in a storm are beautiful. A life that does not need performance to feel meaningful is beautiful. The world will not celebrate these things as loudly as it celebrates glamour. That is acceptable. The world is often impressed by the wrong things. One of the healthiest distinctions a person can learn is the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich often means visible spending power. Wealth means stored independence. Rich is what people see. Wealth is what they do not. It is the unspent money, the margin, the flexibility, the ability to say no, the ability to absorb surprise, the ability to think beyond the next paycheck. That is a much more valuable condition than people first realize. A person can look rich and be one bad month away from trouble. A person can look ordinary and be financially stronger than almost anyone around him understands. I know which position I would rather occupy. I have also learned that money by itself rarely cures psychological emptiness. People often imagine that if they could just reach a higher bracket, they would finally settle internally. Sometimes more money does solve practical problems, and practical problems matter. But the deeper restlessness many people carry is not always financial. They want respect, safety, proof, admiration, closure, status, reassurance that their life counts. Money can temporarily mask those hungers. It rarely resolves them. That is why wealthy people can remain miserable. They bought the symbols and still could not buy peace. This is where gratitude becomes practical. People hear gratitude and imagine softness, sentiment, or vague moral advice. I think gratitude is one of the most useful financial tools there is. Gratitude shrinks the gap between expectation and reality. Since so much misery lives in that gap, anything that shrinks, it has enormous economic value. A grateful person is harder to manipulate. He is less available for envy, less available for fear-based selling, less available for the suggestion that his current life is invalid until upgraded. A grateful person can still work hard. He can still improve. He can still save and invest and want to build. But he is much less likely to poison his own progress through comparison. That matters. The same is true of contentment. Contentment is not passivity. It is not giving up. It is the ability to enjoy what you have without constantly ruining it by measuring it against a fantasy. It is the ability to say, "This is enough for now." That sentence is far more powerful than the culture wants you to know, because a person who can say it becomes difficult to exploit. He needs less to feel whole, because he needs less. His savings go further, because his savings go further. His options improve, because his options improve. His life gets stronger. The irony is that desiring less often produces a better financial life. The person who can control his expectations has an advantage that no raise can fully replicate. That is one of the deepest truths in this subject. I have noticed, too, that people underestimate the noble side of financial discipline. They think getting better with money is merely about accumulating more dollars. I do not see it that way. The noblest goal of money, in my view, is independence. Not spectacle, not domination, not applause, independence. The ability to live more on your own terms. The ability to wake up and know that your time is somewhat more yours. The ability to make choices from thought rather than panic. The ability to protect your household from chaos when the world behaves as the world always eventually does. That is why I do not admire wealth that exists only as display. I admire money that buys self-ownership. A person with little money can still possess this in spirit to a surprising degree. I have known ordinary people who were beholden to almost no one's influence but their own, and because of that they lived more freely than many very rich men. I have also known fabulously wealthy people who were completely owned by reputation, expectations, legal fights, peers, and the maintenance costs of their own image. That is why scale is not enough to judge a financial life. Freedom must be part of the judgment. Once you understand that, certain decisions become easier. Saving stops feeling like deprivation. It starts feeling like self-respect. Living below your means stops feeling like failure. It starts feeling like strategy. A boring investment plan stops feeling unimpressive. It starts feeling like an engine. Turning down status games stops feeling like missing out. It starts feeling like refusing to enter a competition designed to keep you unsatisfied. That shift in interpretation is enormous. Most people do not need a secret. They need a redefinition. They need to stop asking, "How do I look more successful?" They need to start asking, "How do I become harder to control?" They need to stop asking, "What do richer people buy?" They need to start asking, "What kind of life actually lets me sleep?" They need to stop asking, "How much more?" They need to start asking, "What does enough look like for me?" That question can rescue a life. It can save marriages. It can save mental health. It can save careers from being chained to lifestyles they were never meant to carry. It can save children from growing up in homes where money is always present, but never peaceful. And it can save a person from the great mistake of spending a lifetime chasing more, while never realizing that peace was available at a much lower price. I think one of the hidden truths of money is that the life most people actually want is cheaper than the life they feel pressured to perform. Once they see that clearly, many things become simpler. They stop trying to impress strangers. They stop confusing income with freedom. They stop assuming that bigger spending means bigger progress. They stop believing that one more purchase will solve a spiritual problem. They stop living as though all achievement must be visible. And slowly, through repetition, they begin to understand something the modern world works very hard to hide. The real flex was never looking rich. It was building a life no one else controls.